Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazarov Chess Channel and welcome back to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I wanted to show a really brilliant game that was played in 1995 between the beast from Baku, Garry Kasparov, and the legendary Chucky, Vassily Ivanchuk. So I think Vassily Ivanchuk was sort of a player that Garry Kasparov really hated to play against. Garry Kasparov was of course the best player back in the 80s, back in the 90s, but still when he faced Vassily Ivanchuk, something different was going on. Chucky was, as I said, sort of a player that beat many times Garry Kasparov, even with some great tactics. Back in the 80s, there are many great games played by Chucky in which he destroyed simply Garry Kasparov. Although, as I said, Chucky was never really the world championship challenger, and he never had the opportunity to become the world champion. But when he faced Garry Kasparov, he was playing simply his best chess because he could really trick, I think, Garry Kasparov with some opening lines, and he could also trick Garry Kasparov with some great tactics. We have to agree, Vassily Ivanchuk is a great tactician, so when you allow him some tactics, he will find his tactics, he will find his attacking opportunities, even against such a sharp attacker like Garry Kasparov. So this game is special because Vassily Ivanchuk will stay here for more than 20 moves with the king in the center against Garry Kasparov, which could be basically a suicide if someone else, I think, would play the king in the center position against Garry Kasparov. I think Garry would find a way to destroy him, but not Vassily Ivanchuk. Here he annoyed a little bit Garry Kasparov with his king in the center position for a long time. So let's check out now the game. E4 played by Garry Kasparov. We have E6 by Chucky, D4, D5. The French defense is on the board. After the move knight to C3, we have bishop to B4, the Winawer variation, and now the main line is of course the move E5. We have B6. In the continuation of the game, we're preparing, of course, from Black's perspective, the move C5. In the continuation here, Garry Kasparov played the move A3, and now here, that's what I meant. I think Vassily Ivanchuk tricked here a little bit Garry Kasparov with the next move. He played now the move bishop to F8, and this move is maybe not the best of moves when it comes to computer evaluations. The main line would be something like bishop to C3, then B takes C3. Still, white has this dominant bishop pair, then bishop to D3 could happen, and then in the continuation of the game, white will probably attack the king side with H4, H5, even H6 if it's possible. Then even with rook to H3, rook to F3, bishop to D3, even king to F1. You see many times in these types of structures, and then black is trying to find some counterplay with C5, knight to C6, and similar ideas. So white would be challenged here then in the center. So okay, but Vassily Ivanchuk played now the move bishop to F8. So if you don't want to give up your bishop for a knight, the correct way is to retreat to F8. If you retreat to E7, then it's a bad continuation because you have taken the natural square for your knight. Because of the move E5, you cannot go here with your knight on F6, but then you cannot also go here to E7. Knight to H6 is not a possibility. I think if that happens, if knight to H6 happens, then bishop to H6 will come immediately. Then you have a weakened pawn structure, and I think strategically black is simply lost. So that's why bishop to F8, as I said, maybe not the best of moves, but if you don't want to take the knight on C3, then it's simply time to play bishop to F8. So in the continuation of the game, we have knight to F3, normal development here by Garry Kasparov. We have knight to E7, and now H4 here by played by Garry Kasparov. And now we can I think immediately notice the problems of this position because the pawn structure is blocked here, and whenever the pawn structure is blocked, we should evaluate our bishop strength. So here is the pawn structure. We can notice now that black has a decent bishop here that could play on this diagonal, but the bad bishop that black has is of course the light square bishop. The light square bishop is simply blocked out by its own pawn structures. So that's why what Vassily Ivanchuk would love to do here is to play bishop to A6 and trade off the light square bishops, getting rid of the bad bishop, and then in the continuation of the game, maybe white could have a bad bishop, because if the bishop comes on E3, then it's simply also blocked out by its own pawn. So when we evaluate the bishop strength, so white loves his light square bishop, doesn't love his dark square bishop. On the other hand, black loves his dark square bishop but doesn't love here the light square bishop. So that's why the next couple of moves I think we can understand now by Vassily Ivanchuk, because after move H6 and here H5, which wasn't the best of moves, because knight to E2 is probably the best way, because if now Vassily Ivanchuk would have played something like C5, we can play C3, and now if you try, as we said, to give up the light square bishop for this light square bishop, if you try to trade it, you see the knight on e2 stands a little bit in the way, and now with g3, bishop to g2 and castling, we can get out of this positional threats of blacks and get never allow this bishop to be traded. So that's why with the bishop on g2 we can stay still with our light square bishop on the board, which is basically the best minor piece of white. So that's why here after move h6 and h5, you see now with the move a5, Vassily Ivanchuk is preparing now finally this move bishop to a6. He wants to really trade it off, getting rid of it because it's simply too blocked out by the central pawn structure here with this e6, e6, f7 and d5 pawn chain. So here bishop to b5, Garry Kasparov realizes Ivanchuk's idea, so that's why he wants to develop the light square bishop. After c6 we have bishop to a4, we have knight to d7, and now knight to e2. We have b5. Chucky expands on the queen side, which is a natural idea because that's the direction of the attack that we should use. The pawn chain always in this blocked pawn structures is always showing us the direction of the attack. So white is making progress here towards the king side. On the other hand, black is making progress here towards the queen side. So bishop to b3, we have now c5. Very, very nice attacking game here by Ivanchuk. He simply expands on the queen side, stays with the king in the center, and now after move c3, knight to c6, and here Garry Kasparov finally castles. We have queen to c7 by Ivanchuk, normal ideas. We want still to develop bishop to b7, bishop to a6, and now maybe really an unnecessary move here by Garry Kasparov. He played now the move rook to e1. Although this rook to e1 is a natural idea because the king is in the center, and you should probably place your rook where the king is, because if something gets cleared, then the king could be endangered. But I'm not sure if something will get cleared here on the e file. So this rook to e1 was, I think, sort of a loss of tempo here for Garry Kasparov. Maybe bishop to c2 or knight to f4 are much better ideas than even with bishop to c2. Maybe even to try some tactics, knight takes e6, then bishop to g6 and similar ideas. So rook to e1, as I said, maybe slight inaccuracy here by Garry Kasparov, because what are you going to try here with the rook? I don't see clear ideas how to break the position on the e file. So rook to e1, sort of a loss of tempo by Kasparov. So that's why here Chucky uses now this moment immediately. c4 breaks on the queen side. We have bishop to c2, and now knight to b6. You see how Ivanchuk is maneuvering all of his pieces towards the queen side, because that's the side that he's attacking. So far, white didn't make progress on the king side, although you have this advanced pawn on h5. But the only way to break this position on the king side is with f4, f5, and still you have to make something with the knight. Then maybe f4. F5 still has to be prepared, even with g4. So it's, I think, far away that from the fact that white will play the move f5. So you need at least 4 or 5 tempi to make that happen. I think when it comes to activity on the queen side, that black is simply slightly better and is attacking the position immediately. So here in the continuation, bishop to f4. Again, Garry Kasparov is not playing on this knight to h2, f4 ideas. F5, as we said, that's the main idea to break the position. Here in the continuation, we have bishop to e7, and now bishop to g3. We have now rook to b8 by Vassily Ivanchuk, although here probably you could have played b4 immediately. b4 breaks the position. After something like bishop to b1, we could even try b3, and then maybe after bishop to d7, even castle queenside. I think castle queenside would be a natural idea here also for black, and then maybe with f6 try to open the position, maybe rook to g8 and similar stuff, and try a counter attack on the king side. So this could be possible because the pawn structure now on the queen side is blocked. This could be also a very nice strategy here for black. So after move bishop to g3, Ivanchuk decided to play rook to b8, supporting his b4 attack further. In the continuation of the game, we have finally this idea knight to h2, and now Ivanchuk plays queen to d8, knight to g4. We have b4, and now a takes b4, a takes b4, and here again maybe slightly inaccuracy here by Garry Kasparov. He plays now c takes b4. This wasn't good because this move creates now this isolated pawn on b2. A better idea is simply play knight to f4, again maybe with some tactics somewhere here, knight takes e6, knight takes g6 as the long-term plan. It's of course not possible immediately, but if you play now this way, then after something like b takes c3, still we can protect our pawn. We can now have maybe this weak pawn on c3, but at least this is not an isolated pawn. Maybe this pawn can be protected with knight, queen to d2 or knight to e2, at least for a while we have defended this position. But here Garry Kasparov makes, I think, the mistake here. C takes b4, we have knight to b4, bishop to b1, and now bishop to d7 here by Chucky. b3, Garry Kasparov is trying to break the position, but now you see Garry gets challenged on the a file, because that's the file that we're searching for. After rook takes a8, we have queen to a8, and now the queen has taken over on the a file. We have now a great activity with both of these bishops from Black's perspective. The knights are already on the queen side, so it's simply a much better position here for Black. So in the continuation, we have b takes c4, knight to c4, and now knight to c1. Again, not the best of moves. Again, bishop to f4, trying to get back, maybe even bishop to c1. This could be an idea, at least battling now on the queen side somehow with the minor pieces, because we said in the beginning that the dark square bishop is not the best of pieces of white, so maybe trying to maneuver it somewhere here, trying to defend this position on the queen side at least for a while, could be a nice idea. But here Garry Kasparov played knight to c1. Here we have bishop to a4 attacking the queen, queen to e2, and now queen to a7. You see now the problems. This backward pawn on d4 is now long-term weakness. In the continuation of the game, here Garry Kasparov played knight to e3, but Chucky simply takes, queen takes d4, and from this point on it's a completely winning game here for Chucky. He has taken the most important pawn, the centralized pawn. After the move knight takes c4, we have the d takes c4, queen to f1 here by Garry Kasparov, and after castling, believe me or not, here Garry Kasparov resigns. So this is now move 31. So for 30 moves, Vassily Ivanchuk stayed with the king in the center. Garry Kasparov didn't find good attacking opportunities, how to make progress. Really wild. I think it was a surprise, this opening line in the beginning. Bishop to f8. So as said, maybe not the best of moves, but sometimes I think you can surprise your opponent with this opening line, although the engine will say you that it's maybe inaccuracy, but still I kind of like this line, because still you have opportunities. Then to breaks with c5, as we said here, it was an interesting idea by Chucky with the move bishop to a6, potential bishop to a6, getting rid of the light square bishop. So as said, you see even a great attacker like Garry Kasparov had some trouble to make progress on the king side. Chucky took the pawn and got the game eventually. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Maybe it wasn't the best tactical games, but really interesting lines of the French defense. If you want to study the French defense more, here is our playlist of the whole series, the French defense from White's and from Black's perspective. And if you want to see some other best chess games from all times, check out my whole playlist. Here's the link to our playlist of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.